Hi, y'all. My name's Keri. I am an SRE at Noble Nine, and today I want to tell you all of Noble Nine's secrets. Uh, Basically, I just want to share some of the templates that we use to drive SLO adoption as part of our software development lifecycle. So, if you're not already familiar with the software development lifecycle, this is a pretty common one that is usually used when people refer to SDLC nowadays. It comes from the Agile SDLC model, but there's a ton of different models. I think the original SDLC methodology was created back in 1960 with the waterfall model, which is basically just like a similar type, but instead of being a loop, it just kind of cascades at each part. And the idea was that you do all of the work at the beginning so that by the time you get to the end, you have just the most logical progression of your software development. But that made it really hard to make changes. And so back in 2001, the website's actually still up, but somebody created the Agile Manifesto. It's like agilemanifesto.org. You can still view it there. And what they did was they just kind of took a lot of the different models that had come out over the years for SDLC, and they put a manifesto to it that really talked about the driving factors around it and kind of putting it back into this loop. And that's kind of the model that most people use nowadays, where you do all of these steps kind of simultaneously and kind of flowing together so that you can make changes and iterate on things as often as possible and as often as you need. And that's just made things a lot better, a lot faster. It makes development velocity faster, as well as like shipping features a little bit faster as well. And overall, you're focusing on the customer satisfaction because you're able to do your work a lot faster and more efficiently without that burnout. So, really, what I wanted to focus on here is how Noble Nine slots SLOs into our software development lifecycle. So to start, I wanted to, there we go. I wanted to go over just kind of briefly each step and the types of templates that a lot of companies use, including us, in each piece of the software development lifecycle. And then I'm going to show you kind of three ways that we have adjusted some of our templates to add SLOs earlier into the process. So in step one, the planning phase, you might be familiar with like requests for comments or even OKRs where you're setting like your team goals. A lot of times those kind of turn into project plans, right? Project ideation, which for us, we like to put into Jira. So we have PI tickets or project idea tickets. Those will often spawn RFC documents. And then in analyze, this is one of the ones that we're going to go over today with our templates, but product requirement documents or PRDs. That's like a really interesting outline of a new feature that you'd want to build and all of the user journeys that are included in it. You know, it could include your some of your functional requirements and your non-functional requirements. So it's really the early stages of analyzing how you want this feature to be built out. Risk analysis, software requirement specification, which would be more so if you want just the non-functional technical requirements. Some people separate that out. You can also build out your user personas here, which is really just talking through your customer user journeys. You know, kind of what types of things you expect your customers to do, how you expect them to use your app, maybe even doing some user testing where you can figure out maybe gather some data about creative ways that people might be using your application that you didn't even think of. So this is really about the research phase and requirement phase here. And then the design phase, these are probably things that you're more familiar with in our industry, with system design docs, right? Architectural diagrams. You can even have UX design docs where you can have full mock-ups and comparisons of how you'd want your UI designed, and even a technical roadmap. So this might be, you know, showing versionings if it's a brand new feature, you can have a V1, V2, V3, or an alpha, beta release channel roadmap. Just really getting into the weeds on that one. And the implement phase is where we actually develop the code, right? So this is going to include pull requests. It'll include docs for your CI/CD pipelines, technical documentation, or like run books of maybe how you would troubleshoot something if something went wrong with the system. So that would be like run books for your on-call teams. Definition of done, which I think is a really important document here that sometimes gets overlooked early on. But definition of done being, what do we actually need to have completed for our product in order to consider it done and production ready. And so that I think that's a really important one there. There's the test phase. This is where you'll have bug tickets logged, which usually run off of templates. You'll have test plans, ideally that can be reusable. We like to include benchmark testing on here. So we'll kind of do a benchmark and cost breakdown kind of together, and we call cost breakdowns FinOps or financial operations. And what we're doing there is really trying to figure out how, like maybe for our product specifically, how much does it cost for us to host one SLO unit? And that's really important to us because we want to make sure that we are being able to price accordingly for customers. So that's beneficial for both sides. So benchmark testing is not just only benchmarking for like user capacity and load, but also for price benchmarking. And then of course the deploy, this is when it actually hits production. Of course, you'll have release notes here. This should be the phase where end user documentation gets published, and we have some pretty basic templates that we like to use there. If you have any APIs that are related to this, make sure that the API is documented well. And then the last step of SDLC here is the maintenance or maintain section. And so a lot of times this is referred to as kind of support docs, but we also like to include our incident docs here. So this is another one we'll go over, but the incident state doc, which is the doc that we use while an incident is ongoing to record the state of the incident at the time that everything is happening. And then the one that I'll show today is the incident retrospective doc, which is after the incidents happen, maybe a week later after we've been able to do some work and everything's closed out, how we can learn from that and just do the knowledge share about what happened there and how we can prevent that in the future. And then of course, just any like internal support documents as well would be part of this phase. So this is one of the templates that I wanted to show you. This is our PRD. And the reason that we put SLOs in here is to really focus early on how we can have SLOs be kind of in the forefront of our mind when we're thinking about this. Like, I know there's some bias because we are an SLO company, but I think as far as our SLO journey is involved, this was a really game changer for us because it forced us to kind of think early on about what type of metrics that we would want. Being a relatively young company, we definitely wanted to make sure that, as we've looked at changing our monitoring tools often. And so making sure that we have the correct monitoring in place to build an SLO around this so that when we ship a feature from day one, that we know it's going to be reliable enough and be able to meet our customers' expectations. And it really just helped us minimize incidents for those features. So once we started slotting in the SLOs early on, I think that really was a point of maturity for us, which was really great to see. And this template too, we did make public. It is going to be available in our blog. So I'll put a link to that at the end of this as well. There we go. Another spot that we like to slot SLOs in during our SDLC is during the deploy phase, during the implementation phase when we're actually building out all of the code and we build out our CI/CD pipelines. we actually have an annotation API, and we use that annotation API to sorry, excuse me. We use the annotation API to actually trigger in our CI/CD pipeline, so that when we do a release, it dog foods back to our own Noble9 instance, where we can see that, in our SLO chart, a release happened on this date, or a hotfix happened on this date, or some change happened. And that's really important for when we're going through like an on-call situation where I got paged at 2 a.m. and it's maybe because a release happened in Poland, which happened in the middle of the day their time, but I'm on call and it's 2 a.m. my time. It helps me kind of figure out what happened, and how, if there's an emergency, and help you kind of like pull in other people if needed, or if it's something that we could just roll back, makes triaging significantly faster. So this was a really important piece for us as well. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think part of the reason that we built this annotation API was for our own benefit, and it's just been like a really good customer feature as well. Cool. And then my favorite one, incident retros. We found that it's really important, if an incident happens, that we slot in some sort of step in the retro to create an SLO to help us have wow, I can't speak, sorry, to help us catch this in the future. So in the detection section here, you can see there's some questions that help you kind of think about SLOs. So it'll ask you, if the issue was not detected by an existing SLO, what SLO could we build that would catch this issue early? And then to actually list specific SLIs too, that would help you catch this. So those are going to be your actual monitoring queries that we could use in an actual SLO. And then if an SLO did exist though for it, and it just didn't actually catch it early enough, that gives us some information to help us tweak that SLO as well. So just really thinking about, I know it looks kind of like a second-hand thought in this doc, but it actually in our retros has become a pretty big highlight for us as far as things that we can do to help prevent this in the future. So that was a quick little rundown of the software development lifecycle. Again, that was plan, analyze, design, implement, test, deploy, maintain, all in a little loop. And the spots that we slot our SLOs in early is in the analyze phase, the implement phase, and the maintain phase. So it's basically at every midpoint of this process here. And that's been really helpful for us. There's also, as far as just getting SLOs integrated into the culture of your company, we've also created this based off of our own experience as well. And we called this the SLO development lifecycle, so SLO DLC. And this is a very similar process, but just more specifically to SLOs as a whole, not necessarily as part of your SDLC. So I like using these together. I think it's really important because SLOs in general are just so good for building customer trust, and being able to slot them in early will help us iterate on our SLOs frequently and more often enough that we can tweak them and better be prepared to meet our customers' expectations. So that's it. It was really quick. The goal of this really was to be able to share those templates, which I have in the blog post, which is in that QR code on the bottom right, or in the bit.ly link in the center there. So please feel free to make copies of those, use them at your own organizations. But happy to take any questions if anyone has any questions specifically about any of the templates I showed, or any questions about SDLC and SLOs.
But it looks like we don't have any more questions. Thank you so much for doing this, Keri. And anyone that wants to stay connected to Keri, here you can see the links to her social here, both to LinkedIn and Twitter. Keri is also on the SLOCon Slack. So make sure to, if you have any questions for Keri or any questions about the webinar, the presentation, you can always reach Keri there. And Keri, any last words from you?
No, I hope that these templates are useful for everybody in their organizations, and I would love to see more organizations share the templates that they use too. I think it's so important to share knowledge like this cross-company, right? Because it's only going to help everybody improve in the whole industry. And I'm really excited that Noble 9 got to share some of ours.
Me too. Thank you so much for doing this.
Awesome.